The moment I uncovered Jason's secrets, my world shifted beneath my feet. My name is Maya Thompson, a 34-year-old marketing executive living in Chicago, and for years, I believed I was building a life with a man I could trust. Jason, my husband, was a successful entrepreneur, charismatic, ambitious, and seemingly the perfect partner. We met 5 years ago at a business conference, and from the start, our connection felt effortless. He was magnetic, always knowing how to light up a room, and I was captivated by the vision he had for his life and our future together. Our early days were filled with excitement, late-night brainstorming sessions, weekend getaways, and the thrill of building something meaningful both professionally and personally. Jason's business was growing rapidly, and I was proud to support him, often attending networking events by his side. We moved into a stylish condo downtown, hosting dinners for friends and colleagues, creating a life that looked enviable on the outside. But beneath the surface, cracks started to form, subtle and easy to dismiss at first. Jason became more guarded, sometimes distracted during our conversations. I chalked it up to the pressure of running a growing company, convincing myself that his secrets were simply the burdens of entrepreneurship. Still, a small voice inside me whispered doubts, but I pushed them away. I wanted to believe in us. The first real sign came about 6 months ago, just before his birthday. Jason had been evasive when I asked about a new business deal he was excited about. He brushed off my questions with vague answers and a forced smile. It felt off, but I didn't press too hard. When he suggested a surprise birthday party with our close friends and family, I took it as a chance to reconnect. I wanted to believe that things were fine. But then the inconsistencies piled up. I started noticing small details that didn't add up. Unexplained absences, hushed phone calls, and receipts from places he never mentioned. A gnawing feeling grew inside me, one that I couldn't shake no matter how hard I tried. I began paying closer attention, not out of suspicion at first, but because I needed to understand what was happening to the man I loved. One evening, while Jason was out late at a business meeting, I found myself alone in our study, a room he rarely used. My curiosity got the better of me when I spotted his laptop left unlocked. With trembling hands, I opened his email and text messages. What I found was a web of lies. Hidden financial records showing secret debts, transfers to unknown accounts, and messages to a woman whose name I didn't recognize. The woman who wasn't me. The betrayal was suffocating. Jason had been living a double life, weaving a story of success and stability while hiding his troubles and infidelity. The man I thought I knew was a stranger, and my heart broke in ways I hadn't imagined possible. I felt anger, confusion, and a deep sadness that threatened to consume me. But beneath it all, a fierce determination began to burn. I refused to be a victim of his deceit. I spent the next few days quietly gathering more evidence, careful not to alert him. Each discovery added layers to the truth, revealing just how deep his betrayal ran. I realized this wasn't just about lies or a failing marriage. It was about reclaiming my life and dignity. Jason's web of deception was something I wouldn't let define me. Instead, I chose to turn the pain into power. As I pieced together the fragments of our shattered life, I made a decision. I would not confront him in private, nor would I allow him to continue his facade unchecked. I started planning a way to expose the truth at the heart of his world. His birthday party. It would be a moment where the lies he hid so carefully would unravel in front of those who mattered most. I know some might think it reckless or cruel, but to me, it was justice. Jason needed to face the consequences of his actions, and I needed to reclaim my voice. The man who once promised me forever was about to learn that I was no longer willing to be silent. This was not just about revenge. It was about survival, and the strength I found within myself when everything else seemed lost. In the quiet hours of the night, as I prepared for the confrontation ahead, I reflected on how we got here. Jason and I were partners once, sharing dreams and ambitions. But dreams built on lies were never meant to last. I was ready to let the truth be the light that illuminated the path forward, no matter how painful it might be. What came next would change everything. But for now, I held on to the resolve that had carried me through the darkest moments, the belief that no matter how deep the betrayal, I could rise above it. Jason's secrets were out, and soon, the world he had hidden behind a mask would see him for who he truly was. And me? I was ready to reclaim my life, one truth at a time. The days leading up to Jason's birthday party were a blur of quiet observation and careful planning. Each moment I spent with him felt like walking a tightrope, balancing between the woman he thought I was and the storm of betrayal I was hiding beneath my calm exterior. I kept my emotions locked away, studying every word, every gesture, every subtle inconsistency in his stories. It was as if pieces of a puzzle were slowly falling into place, revealing a picture I wished I could unsee. Jason's behavior had been off for months, but I hadn't realized just how deep the deception ran until I started connecting the dots. There were moments when his charm felt rehearsed, when his eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt, fear, or perhaps the exhaustion of maintaining lies. I remembered a dinner conversation weeks before, when he casually mentioned a business trip to New York. But a quick check of flight records later revealed no such trip had taken place. Then there were the late nights, the vague excuses, and the unexplained absences that once seemed trivial. Now, they felt like deliberate acts of concealment. I replayed conversations in my mind, noticing how he avoided certain topics or changed the subject when I asked too many questions. The man who once shared everything with me had become a master of half-truths and carefully crafted stories. One evening, while Jason was out at what he claimed was a networking event, I found myself compelled to dig deeper. I accessed his phone when it was unlocked, something I had avoided out of respect and fear, but the need for answers overpowered my hesitation. Hidden beneath layers of encrypted messages and deleted texts, I uncovered conversations with a woman named Claire. Their messages were intimate, filled with plans and promises that shattered the illusion of Jason's fidelity. But the betrayal didn't stop there. I discovered financial documents revealing secret debts that Jason had never mentioned. There were transfers to offshore accounts, unexplained withdrawals, and invoices for luxury gifts that weren't for me. It became clear that he was not just hiding an affair, but also a financial mess he was desperate to cover up. My heart pounded as I sifted through the evidence, a mixture of rage and sorrow swirling inside me. How long had this been going on? How many lies had he told me, carefully weaving a narrative that kept me in the dark? The weight of his deception was suffocating, but beneath the pain, a cold resolve took hold. I wouldn't let him continue to manipulate the truth or use our life together as a smokescreen. I began to plan quietly, meticulously. Jason's birthday party was the perfect stage, not just for a confrontation, but for a reckoning. It was a celebration he wanted to be grand, surrounded by friends and family who admired him. Yet, it would also be the moment when his carefully constructed facade would crumble before their eyes. I arranged for discreet displays. Files, screenshots, financial statements, placed subtly around the venue. Nothing flashy or accusatory, just enough for those paying attention to see the truth. I had to be strategic. I needed to maintain my composure and let the evidence speak for itself. This wasn't about spectacle, but about exposing the reality behind the man everyone thought they knew. Preparing for the party, I wrestled with waves of emotion. The desire to scream, to cry, to run away was strong, but I held steady. I reminded myself that this was about reclaiming control, about refusing to be the woman who was deceived in silence. Jason had underestimated me, and soon, everyone else would see why. In the days before the event, I reached out to a few close friends, those I trusted implicitly, without revealing the full extent of Jason's betrayal. Their support gave me strength and clarity. I wasn't alone in this, even if Jason wanted me to feel isolated and powerless. I started drafting the words I would say, rehearsing calm and confidence instead of anger or despair. Every interaction with Jason felt like a performance on my part. I smiled, I laughed, I acted as if everything was fine, all while the truth simmered just beneath the surface. He remained oblivious to my discovery, continuing his charade with an ease that made my blood boil. How could he be so detached, so arrogant? On the morning of the party, I woke up early, nerves twisting in my stomach. I dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that reflected the woman I was becoming, strong, poised, and unbreakable. I packed a small folder with the most damning evidence, ready to present it if the moment called for it. But mostly, I trusted the subtle arrangements I had made would do the talking. As guests began to arrive, the atmosphere was light and festive. Jason was in his element, charming everyone with his usual charisma. I watched from the sidelines, a calm observer amid the celebration. People greeted me warmly, commenting on how happy Jason looked. If only they knew. The party unfolded as if on a stage, the perfect setting for the revelation I had planned. Jason moved through the crowd, basking in the admiration, unaware that the foundation beneath his feet was about to collapse. I felt a strange mix of pity and satisfaction. This man who had built his empire on lies would soon be exposed. Throughout the evening, I kept my composure, waiting for the right moment to let the truth surface. I watched as friends and family smiled and laughed, completely unaware of the darkness lurking just beneath the surface. It was a delicate balance. Too soon, and I risked chaos. Too late, and I might lose the opportunity to make an impact. As I moved through the room, my eyes caught the subtle glances and whispered conversations sparked by the evidence I had placed. Screens on walls displayed financial documents. Text messages projected discreetly on a side screen. The atmosphere shifted imperceptibly, tension threading through the festivities like an invisible current. Jason's confident smile faltered, ever so slightly, when he noticed the change. His eyes searched the crowd, landing on me with a flicker of confusion and panic. The man who had seemed so untouchable was beginning to unravel, piece by piece. In that moment, I realized how far I had come. From disbelief and hurt to a place of quiet strength and determination. I wasn't just exposing his lies. I was reclaiming my power, rewriting the narrative he had tried to control. The night was far from over, but I knew the truth had already begun its work. The moment I had been preparing for arrived with a quiet intensity that took everyone by surprise. Jason's birthday party, once a scene of celebration and laughter, began to unravel with a subtle shift in the atmosphere, one that only those paying close attention could detect at first. I stood near the center of the room, my heart steady despite the storm brewing beneath the surface. This was the moment I would confront the man who had built his life on lies. Jason was in his element, holding court among friends and family, his usual charm on full display. He raised a glass to toast another year of success and happiness, his smile wide and confident. But as he spoke, my eyes scanned the crowd, noticing the curious glances directed toward the screens I had arranged around the venue. Financial statements, hidden messages, and photographs flickered discreetly for those who looked closely enough to see. I stepped forward, my voice calm but clear, cutting through the murmur of the gathering. "There's something I need to share with all of you," I said, holding Jason's gaze without flinching. The room quieted, the festive energy giving way to a tension that was impossible to ignore. Jason's smile faltered, confusion and panic flashing across his face. "Maya, what are you—" he began, but I raised a hand, signaling for silence. "I know the truth about Jason," I continued, my tone steady. "About the lies he's told me, and about the life he's been hiding behind that smile." I gestured toward the screens displaying the evidence, messages to another woman, financial documents revealing secret debts and transfers, images that spoke louder than words ever could. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Friends exchanged shocked looks, and the warmth of the celebration turned cold and uncertain. Jason's confident demeanor cracked, his eyes darting from one face to another, searching for support that wasn't there. He tried to laugh it off, a nervous chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice strained. "None of this means what you think it does." But the proof was undeniable. I had spent weeks gathering every piece of evidence, ensuring that there was no room for denial or excuse. The truth was laid bare for everyone to see, and the walls Jason had built around his carefully crafted image were crumbling fast. One of his closest friends stepped forward, a look of disbelief etched on his face. "Jason, is this true? How could you?" The question hung heavily in the air, echoing the sentiments of many who had once trusted him. Jason's defenses faltered as he stammered through explanations, each one more transparent than the last. He tried to shift the blame, accusing me of overreacting, of misunderstanding the situation. But his words fell flat against the weight of the evidence and the growing disapproval among the guests. I remained composed, refusing to be drawn into his attempts to manipulate the narrative. This was not a battle of words. It was a reckoning. The man who had deceived me for years was now exposed, and the people who mattered most to him were witnessing the truth firsthand. The tension in the room escalated quickly. Conversations turned into heated whispers, and some guests quietly excused themselves, unwilling to be part of the unfolding drama. Others confronted Jason directly, their voices sharp with betrayal and anger. The party that had promised joy and connection had become a stage for confrontation and heartbreak. Jason's face flushed with embarrassment and frustration. He paced nervously, trying to regain control. But the damage was done. His reputation, once untarnished, was now shattered in front of his friends, family, and business associates. The man who had seemed invincible was suddenly vulnerable and exposed. Amid the chaos, I felt a strange sense of calm. The weight of the past months, the lies, the deceit, the sleepless nights, began to lift. I had taken back the power he had tried to steal from me. This public unveiling was more than just revenge. It was a statement that I would no longer be a silent victim. A few guests approached me quietly, offering support and sympathy. Their words reminded me that I wasn't alone, that there were people who believed in me and stood by my side. It was a small but meaningful comfort in the midst of the storm. Jason, however, was not ready to accept defeat. He made a final, desperate attempt to salvage the evening, addressing the crowd with a forced smile and hollow promises to make things right. But the sincerity was gone, buried beneath layers of betrayal and broken trust. As the party drew to an uneasy close, I knew this was only the beginning of a longer journey. The fallout from this night would ripple through our lives in ways I couldn't yet predict. But for now, I had reclaimed my voice, and the truth had been spoken aloud for all to hear. Walking away from the shattered remnants of what had once been our life together, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. But in his place stood a woman who was beginning to understand her own strength. This night wasn't just about exposing Jason's lies. It was about reclaiming my dignity and setting the course for a new future. The path ahead would be difficult, but I was ready to face it head-on, armed with the truth and a resolve that no betrayal could break. The days following Jason's birthday party were a whirlwind of shock and shifting alliances. The man who had once stood confidently at the center of our social and professional circles was suddenly the subject of whispered conversations and skeptical glances. I watched as his carefully curated reputation began to unravel, piece by piece, under the weight of his own deceit. Friends who had once praised Jason's charm turned distant, their trust fractured by the revelations. Invitations I had watched Jason extend for years were quietly rescinded, replaced by awkward silences and unreturned calls. Business associates, previously eager to collaborate, began to hedge their bets, questioning not just his integrity, but the stability of the ventures he led. The fallout was swift and unforgiving, a stark reminder that trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. Despite the chaos engulfing Jason's world, I found myself surrounded by a different kind of support. Close friends and family rallied around me, offering comfort and encouragement in ways I hadn't anticipated. Their steady presence reminded me that I was not alone, that my pain and betrayal were met with empathy rather than judgment. It was a balm to my bruised spirit, and it fortified my resolve to move forward. Amid the emotional upheaval, I began to consider the practical realities of our situation. Jason and I shared assets, investments, and a life that had been intertwined for years. The question of legal standing and financial security loomed large, demanding careful thought and strategic action. I realized that reclaiming my life meant not only confronting the emotional scars, but also securing my future on my own terms. I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer who specialized in family law and asset division. Sitting across from her, I laid out the story, the lies, the betrayal, the evidence I had gathered. She listened intently, asking pointed questions that helped clarify my legal position. The prenuptial agreements, joint accounts, and business partnerships were all on the table, and I needed to understand the best way to protect myself. The lawyer advised me on the importance of documenting everything: the financial discrepancies, the communications, and the timeline of events. She emphasized that transparency and preparedness would be key in any negotiations or proceedings that might follow. Her calm professionalism was reassuring, a steady guide through the murky waters ahead. As I left the meeting, a sense of empowerment began to take root. The path was daunting, but I was no longer adrift. I had a plan, a team, and a newfound clarity about what I needed to do. Jason's betrayal had been a painful awakening, but it also marked the beginning of my reclaiming control over my life. In the weeks that followed, I focused on organizing my affairs. I reviewed financial documents, cataloged evidence, and sought advice from trusted friends who had faced similar challenges. Each step was a small victory, a reaffirmation that I could navigate this difficult terrain with strength and grace. Socially, I began to rebuild my life beyond the shadow of Jason's scandal. Invitations to gatherings returned, this time extended to me for who I was as an individual, rather than as his wife. I reconnected with old friends and embraced new hobbies that nurtured my sense of self. Painting classes, weekend hikes, and book clubs became my sanctuary, places where I could breathe and rediscover joy. Professionally, I threw myself into my work with renewed focus. Marketing campaigns and client meetings became opportunities to prove my resilience and dedication. My colleagues noticed the change, a quiet confidence that spoke of someone who had faced adversity and refused to be defined by it. I was building a new identity, one grounded in independence and self-respect. Throughout this period, Jason's attempts to reach out were sporadic and insincere. I received messages ranging from apologies to veiled threats, each met with my firm resolve to maintain distance. I understood that protecting my peace was paramount, and I refused to be drawn back into the chaos he represented. The legal process, while slow and at times frustrating, progressed steadily. Negotiations over assets began, and I was prepared to stand my ground. The betrayal had cost me much, but I was determined to ensure that it did not cost me my future. I sought a fair settlement that reflected not just financial realities, but the emotional toll of Jason's actions. In quiet moments, I reflected on how far I had come since the night of the party. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but it no longer held me captive. Instead, it fueled a determination to rebuild, to create a life defined not by deceit, but by honesty and strength. Jason's downfall was a stark reminder of the consequences of lies. But my journey was about something more profound: the reclaiming of dignity and the pursuit of a future shaped by my own choices. With the support of those who believed in me and a clear vision of what lay ahead, I was ready to embrace the challenges and opportunities that awaited. This chapter of my life was far from over, but I faced it with a courage I hadn't known I possessed. The road to healing and independence was unfolding before me, and I was stepping onto it with open eyes and an unwavering spirit. Jason's betrayal had been a catalyst, but I was determined to be the author of my own story moving forward. In the weeks and months following the fallout from Jason's birthday party, I found myself navigating a new reality, one where I had to take full control of my life and future. The initial shock had faded, replaced by a focused determination to rebuild on my own terms. It wasn't easy. The emotional scars were still raw, but I was learning to channel that pain into strength and growth. I began by organizing every aspect of my life, starting with the practical. I consolidated financial documents, reviewed contracts, and worked closely with my attorney to negotiate a fair settlement. The process was painstaking, filled with legal jargon and tense discussions, but I refused to be intimidated. I wanted to ensure that I walked away with not just financial security, but a clear sense of independence. Negotiations with Jason were fraught with tension. He alternated between denial and attempts to manipulate the situation, but I remained firm. I had learned not to be swayed by empty words or shallow apologies. My lawyer and I presented a well-documented case, backed by the evidence I had collected, which left little room for Jason to maneuver. Eventually, we reached an agreement that felt just, one that recognized both the financial realities and the personal betrayals I had endured. With the legal matters settling, I turned my attention to healing and rediscovery. I reconnected with myself in ways I hadn't allowed before. Friends who had stood by me became my pillars of support, reminding me of my worth and encouraging me to explore new interests. I enrolled in a photography course, something I'd always wanted to try but had put off in the busyness of life. Capturing moments through the lens became a metaphor for my own journey, finding beauty and clarity even in unexpected places. I also prioritized my health and well-being. Early morning runs along Lake Michigan became a routine, each step a small victory over the weight of the past. Yoga classes helped me center my mind, while evenings spent reading or journaling offered a quiet space to process emotions. These habits were more than distractions. They were acts of self-care and empowerment. Socially, I rebuilt my circle with intention. I attended gatherings not as Jason's wife, but as Maya, an individual with her own voice and aspirations. It was liberating to forge connections based on authenticity rather than association. Some old friendships deepened, while new ones blossomed. Each relationship a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Professionally, I threw myself into my work with renewed energy. The marketing campaigns I led became platforms to showcase not just my skills, but my renewed confidence. Colleagues noticed the change, a quiet strength and focus that spoke of someone who had faced adversity and emerged stronger. Opportunities for advancement came my way, and I embraced them, knowing that my career was a vital part of my newfound independence. Throughout this transformation, I maintained clear boundaries with Jason. His attempts to reach out, whether through messages or mutual acquaintances, were met with polite but firm refusal. Protecting my peace was paramount. I understood that distance was necessary to heal and to prevent old wounds from reopening. One afternoon, I received a message from him, a brief, remorseful note expressing regret and a desire to remain friends. I stared at the screen, feeling a flicker of old pain, but also a steady resolve. I knew that forgiveness was a personal journey, one I wasn't ready to embark on, and perhaps never would. I deleted the message without responding, choosing to prioritize my well-being over his need for closure. Reflecting on the journey so far, I recognized the transformation that had taken place. The betrayal that once threatened to define me had instead become a catalyst for growth. I had reclaimed my dignity and autonomy, proving to myself that resilience was not just a word but a way of life. The path ahead was still uncertain, filled with challenges I could not yet foresee, but I faced it with open eyes and an unwavering spirit. The life I was building was no longer one shaped by deception and betrayal, but by honesty, strength, and self-respect. In embracing this new chapter, I found a freedom I hadn't known before, a freedom to live authentically and to pursue happiness on my own terms. The road to recovery was ongoing, but I was no longer afraid of the journey. With each step, I was rewriting my story, one of empowerment and hope. A few weeks after I severed the last ties with Jason, a message appeared in my inbox, short, tentative, and heavy with regret. His words were an apology, wrapped in an attempt to reconnect, a plea for understanding, and perhaps a sliver of forgiveness. I stared at the screen longer than I intended, feeling the old ache stir briefly before I steadied myself. I realized then that protecting my peace meant more than just walking away. It meant choosing not to invite the past back into my life. I didn't respond. In that moment, I understood how far I had come. The woman who once clung to the idea of love and trust at any cost had transformed into someone who valued her dignity above all else. Jason's remorse, genuine or not, no longer held power over me. I was done being defined by his betrayal. The journey from heartbreak to empowerment had not been linear, nor had it been easy. There were nights when the pain was raw, and days when doubt crept in like a shadow. But each challenge was met with a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. I learned that strength isn't the absence of vulnerability. It's the courage to face it head on. Reflecting on the path I had taken, I saw how every step, from uncovering lies to standing tall at the party, from navigating legal battles to rebuilding my life, had shaped me into a stronger, wiser person. The betrayal that once threatened to break me had instead become a catalyst for growth, a painful but necessary awakening. I thought about the friendships that had deepened, the new passions I had discovered, and the career milestones I had achieved. These were not just distractions from the past, but affirmations of a future reclaimed. I was no longer the woman who needed validation from a man's lies. I was someone who stood on her own foundation. The lessons I learned were profound. I understood that no one has the right to control my narrative or dictate my worth. I discovered the importance of setting boundaries, of demanding honesty, and of refusing to settle for anything less than respect. Most importantly, I realized that healing is an ongoing process, one that requires patience, kindness toward oneself, and the willingness to embrace change. My story became a testament to the power of resilience and strategic action. It was about more than just exposing betrayal. It was about reclaiming a life that had been stolen and crafting a new one filled with authenticity, and hope. Sharing my experience with others, I hoped to inspire those who found themselves in similar situations, to remind them that they too could rise from the ashes stronger and more empowered. As I stood on the threshold of this new chapter, I felt a quiet pride. The woman looking back at me in the mirror was unrecognizable from the one who had walked through the door of that party months ago. She was whole, courageous, and fiercely independent. The road ahead was still unwritten, but I faced it with open arms and a heart unburdened by lies. I had reclaimed my voice, my dignity, and my life, and in doing so, I discovered a freedom that no betrayal could ever take away.